There was a time when Captain America tried his best to lift Thor's hammer Mjolnir, with less than successful results, but some fans believe he'll have better luck with an item forged with Uru metal in Avengers Endgame. We'll take a closer look at his actions during the Battle of Wakanda and reveal why he could be the one to wield an Infinity Gauntlet. But don't count out Nebula, who has a strong comic book precedent, which means she could be the one to master the Infinity Stones. Heading into Avengers Endgame, one of the prevailing theories is that one of our heroes is gonna have to use the Infinity Stones, a task which is easier said than done. Thanos is so powerful, he punched the Hulk back into Bruce Banner, and even he struggled to use the Infinity Gauntlet. At the end of Infinity War, it seemed as though the gauntlet had been mangled and Thanos had sustained an injury after the decimation. With that in mind, it's no surprise many fans have assumed that we're gonna need a super strong hero to wield a device capable of harnessing the power of all 6 Infinity Stones. When most people think of heavy hitters in the MCU, they think of characters like the Incredible Hulk or Thor, and it's not hard to see why. But there are a lot of other options out there when it comes to the candidates for the Infinity Gauntlet wielder, and today we're gonna take a look at a couple of them. Ever since he was first introduced in Captain America: The First Avenger, people have been underestimating Steve Rogers. Even the US Army didn't want him during wartime, and that has got to hurt the old self-esteem at least a little bit. But later on, we learned that what he lacked in physical strength, he more than made up for when it came to being a dedicated, virtuous, and righteous hero. Oh, and then with some super soldier serum, he quickly became incredibly physically strong as well. Whatever. Sure, he's not gonna win an arm wrestling match against the Hulk, although that's something we wouldn't mind seeing. Knock knock, Russo brothers. But don't underestimate him. Not only is Captain America at the peak of human performance, but he also exemplifies exactly what it means to be a hero. It's this quality which could qualify him for wielding the Infinity Gauntlet in Avengers Endgame. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there are plenty of items you can't possess simply because you're physically strong. Of course, there are the notoriously fickle Infinity Stones, which got us into this whole mess to begin with, and then there's Thor's previous weapon, Mjolnir. Thor has stated before that wielding a weapon made of rare Uru metal isn't an easy task. He claims most people simply lack the physical and mental fortitude to do so. Mjolnir also has the additional difficulty of being bewitched by Odin so that only someone worthy could wield it. In Avengers Age of Ultron, it was revealed that Steve Rogers was among the heroes incapable of picking it up, while Vision was able to so easily. This hilarious, but probably demoralizing failure doesn't mean Steve Rogers could never wield an Uru weapon, though. It's safe to say he's been changed as a result of his time in the MCU. There was a time when he was far too idealistic and less realistic. He was also trained to follow orders and not think for himself, which is understandable given his background. However, we've seen Steve change, most notably in the movie Captain America: Civil War. It's possible Steve has changed into a hero who could indeed possess an Uru weapon, and we might have even seen this hinted at during Avengers Infinity War. During the Battle of Wakanda, we saw Captain America manage to hold off Thanos, at least momentarily. This might not sound particularly impressive, but when you consider how strong Thanos is, it's actually quite the accomplishment. The strength we've seen Steve Rogers exhibit thanks to the super soldier serum seems like it'd have fallen short of being able to hold back the Mad Titan. What if there was another explanation for how Captain America was able to stand up to Thanos, though, Redditor Zan Perkychek believes this could be because Steve Rogers is deemed worthy of using the Infinity Gauntlet and is thus able to stand against it for a brief period of time. Even Thanos looks pretty surprised that Captain America isn't totally overcome by the Infinity Gauntlet. Of course, the Mad Titan proceeds to punch Captain America directly in the face with his other hand, but we're not going to let this stop us from celebrating a tiny little victory. While we're all for hyping up Captain America and celebrating his considerable strengths, we're also realistic. Come on, we're CBR. Well, as realistic as you can be talking about superhumans taking down aliens who are using magical rocks to destroy things. According to Infinity War writer Christopher Marcus, using the Infinity Gauntlet is pretty much a death sentence unless you're the strongest being in the universe. So even if Captain America could control the Infinity Gauntlet, using it along with the Infinity Stones would probably be fatal. But would Cap let this even stop him? Based on his worthiness and how well he stood up to the Gauntlet previously, it seems like he might be able to use the stones, but at the cost of his own life. In Guardians of the Galaxy, we saw what can happen when someone tries to use a single Infinity Stone. Even being able to undo the decimation before losing your own life would be a huge accomplishment, and one Steve Rogers just might be able to pull off. Plus, there's also the idea that Steve Rogers may not be destined to survive the events of Avengers Endgame at all. Sacrifice was a big deal in Infinity War, and we expect to see it be a theme in Endgame as well. Captain America actor Chris Evans has previously stated that he'd rather leave the MCU on a high note than remain too long and have fans tire of him, and when filming wrapped up, he posted a moving tribute on social media which many fans interpreted as a goodbye forever to the MCU. Storyline-wise, it makes sense that Captain America may be reaching the end of his deployment. He's been active for a long time, and it seems as though the MCU is moving on to newer heroes. Then there's the scene from the Endgame trailer which shows him gazing at an old photo of Peggy Carter. It's incredibly reminiscent of the scene from Captain America the First Avenger when he also looks at her photo before piloting his ship into the ocean. Although we ended up surviving, Steve was 100% trying to sacrifice his own life to save others. Seeing him looking at Peggy Carter seems like foreshadowing that he's going to do something similar in Avengers Endgame. If someone has to say goodbye in order to undo the decimation, we have no doubt Steve Rogers would be the first to volunteer, and he might just be selected. If he's the only one who can actually use the Infinity Gauntlet and successfully undo the decimation. Of course, we're using success pretty loosely here, since again, it would be fatal. But it would bring a ton of people back to life, so... There's another strong contender in the MCU who's wielded the Infinity Gauntlet successfully in the comic books, and that is Nebula. Compared to Steve Rogers, Nebula is a relative newcomer to the MCU. We first met her in the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie, where we learned that being Thanos' favorite child is at least better than being his least favorite child. Parents generally try to encourage their children to be their best, but Thanos did this by replacing Nebula's body parts with robot parts, each time she'd lose to her sister in battle. Yeah, he's not really Father of the Year. Not only did this cause Nebula to hate her sister Gamora, but apparently it also didn't make her any better of a warrior. Just a terrible job all around, Thanos. Despite Gamora's numerous attempts to apologize and make nice, Nebula wasn't interested, and in her defense, it's not so easy to be kind when you don't have all your original body parts. So up until now, Nebula has pretty much been an unknown variable. She managed to get on decent terms with Gamora, but her primary motivation in life has always been to defeat Thanos. Is she truly a hero, or is she only working amongst them to bring Thanos down? It's safe to say that at this point, losing Nebula wouldn't have the same emotional punch as losing Captain America, though. She's a character we simply don't have as much of a history with, and there's so much we don't even know about her yet. However, in the trailer for Avengers Endgame, we've seen some definite attempts at making her look like a more sympathetic character. There's a shot where she and Tony Stark are working together in that sweet moment when she and Rocket hold hands. Oh. Making a character more relatable, likable, and sympathetic before getting rid of them would be some Game of Thrones style storytelling we honestly wouldn't mind seeing incorporated into the MCU. Just don't hurt Sean Bean again. In the Infinity Gauntlet storyline in the comic books, Thanos is even more cruel to Nebula after he causes the decimation. He traps her in a state of waking death just to really drive home the point that he isn't a fan. But Thanos underestimates Nebula, who eventually gets her hands on the Infinity Gauntlet and uses it to undo the decimation. However, Nebula doesn't do this because she's a hero or because it's the right thing to do. No. She does it because she thinks it's going to make Thanos angry and she just wants to hurt his feelings. It becomes clear that although Thanos doesn't have the Infinity Gauntlet anymore, it's still not in safe hands. Then our heroes are forced to liberate it from Nebula, and even Thanos helps out after realizing what a bad idea it is for her to have access to it. So if we accept that in the MCU, using the Infinity Gauntlet as a non-Thanos person is fatal, then Nebula would only be able to use it one time, and it's possible those cybernetic parts Thanos outfitted her with could help her undo the decimation. It'd be narratively ironic for the horrible things Thanos did to Nebula to ultimately be his downfall. Of course, there's also the question of, like, where the heck is this new Infinity Gauntlet going to come from? In the comic books, Nebula grabs the one that Thanos used, but it's also possible that another one could be created. That'd be cool. Everyone seems to be pinning all of their Gauntlet hopes and dreams on Tony Stark, and it's not hard to see why. With Hank Pym and Shuri gone, he's now unopposed as the most brilliant inventor we know of in the MCU. In addition to all of his own resources, he also now has contacts in Wakanda who could supply him with vibranium, and he'll most likely end up with the resources of Hank Pym as well. The idea of a second Infinity Gauntlet could also tie into the idea that our heroes will be going through time, making copies of the various Infinity Stones. If they can do this while minimizing their interactions with Thanos, then all the better for them, and let's not forget that Eitri is still alive and Peter Dinklage is slated to reprise his role in Avengers Endgame. Then there's the possibility that they'll actually manage to get the Infinity Gauntlet away from Thanos. I mean, after all, we did see a scene where Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor seemed to be confronting Thanos in the Endgame trailer. Of course, getting a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet is only part of the battle, and they'll still have to find someone willing to use it who's ready to make the ultimate sacrifice. So come on, what do you think about the idea that somebody in Endgame may wind up using the Infinity Gauntlet, like Captain America or even Nebula? Do you think it's gonna happen? Are we out of our minds? Share your predictions with us in the comments section and then click on the subscribe button for the latest videos from us here at CBR. Bye for now!